1939. 1989. The year 2039. Tonight we will take you on a voyage from the past, through the present, into the future. Here now, Paula, Zahn, and Forrest Sawyer.
Good evening. Tonight we're going to turn your television set into an electronic time machine so we can take you on a voyage into our future 50 years from now.
You won't hear talk of colonies on Mars or cities under the sea. Possible, that is within our grasp today, that you or your children will be a part of.
What will our everyday lives be like in 2039? How will we travel? Will medical advances help make us healthier? Will the fight against crime be even more brutal than it is now? Of course, no one really knows. We're just making educated guesses.
But that's a game we've been playing for centuries, from the prophet Nostradamus back in 1555 to modern science fiction writers, all painting visions of worlds that may be waiting for us somewhere up ahead.
In fact, we've all sat in the dark watching those visions shimmering on our neighborhood theater screens. Good or bad, silly or scary, our brightest images of the future have come from the movies.
Roger, in the 20th century.
By turning a little dial to project us ahead in time, we're able to be right with Buck and his friends in the wonderful world of the future.
Do you realize the immense task we shall undertake? We shall excavate the eternal hills. We shall make such use of the treasures of sky and sea and earth as men have never dreamt of.
The Billows feeding machine will eliminate the lunch hour, increase your production, and decrease your overhead.
Well, anybody hungry?
What's that, chicken? They look pretty good.
Well, they're getting better at it all the time.
If you feel you are not properly sedated, call 844. Failure to do so may result in prosecution for criminal drug evasion.
The once great city of New York becomes the one maximum security prison for the entire country. The rules are simple. Once you go in, you don't come out.
Oh, my God.
You maniac! You blew it up!
Some of those dreams about the years ahead are frightening. Today we know that science and technology have limits and sometimes dangerous consequences.
But just 50 years ago, in 1939, things were different. Back then, even while we hung on the edge of World War, we were entranced by the glittering promises of science. So entranced, we put together a huge World's Fair, a giant fantasy land sprawling across New York's Flushing Meadow, and paid tribute to a future so bright, it took your breath away.
Our faith in science was in full bloom then, and 25 million visitors came here to be astonished by what experts guessed and hoped the future would bring. Of course, they were guessing about the world we live in today.
How close did they come to reality? That's our time machine's first stop, a spring day in New York, 1939.
The world at the fair. Their father and mother and sister and brother, oh, everyone's there.
But the fair was more than dazzling displays of music, dance, and fashion. It was a monument to new visions of tomorrow, a promise of things to come that would soon be within everyone's grasp. Nylon stockings, electricity, but robots with social graces?
Quiet, please. I'm doing the talking.
The longest lines waiting to see the future were waiting for a 15-minute ride into 1960, GM's Futurama.
They take their places in the circling chairs for a glimpse into the future.
The technological wizardry used by this exhibit was as futuristic as the world had promised. During a simulated airplane trip across country, speakers with precise timing whispered into the ears of those who waited for hours how they were going to live 21 years later.
And now we see an enlarged section of 1960s express motorway. Traffic moves at unreduced rates of speed. Safe distance between cars is maintained by automatic radio control.
Even today, radio-controlled safe driving is still futuristic. But the superhighways and the cars to fill them with were there. In fact, General Motors underestimated the growth of its own industry. By 1960, there were more than 60 million cars on the road. GM's crystal ball in 1939 saw 35 million cars and the need for American cities to make room for them.
The rights of way have been so rooted as to displace outmoded business sections and undesirable slum areas whenever possible.
There were so many miracles to see and touch for the first time. But some ideas were so far-fetched for 1939, the only way they could be imagined was in a cartoon like this one. Instant food.
Well, I never.
Prefab houses.
Wonderful. Well, what's this?
Affordable cars.
Look what I got, Randy.
These were fanciful predictions that exceeded their 1939 reality, but they were predictions that became, at least in part, our 1989 present.
Mechanical powder puffs may still be an idea that's ahead of its time, but muscle savers for, as they put it, the little woman, were not.
Because men are beginning to realize how much lifting and pushing the little woman has to do around the house, more and more muscle savers are being designed to make the little jobs easier.
Imagine seeing a washing machine for the first time. Imagine a home today without one. But it was the 1939 World's Fair and its avalanche of household appliances that gave us a new definition of American culture to come with push-button conveniences.
The amazing machines and gadgets that almost seem to think for themselves.
How about electric kettles that turn off automatically? Electric coffee pots that brew the coffee and keep it hot? Electric toasters?
The dawn of a new day.
These seductive visions of tomorrow, with their promises of a better life,
It's a paradise.
were seen and heard by millions of fairgoers, most of whom were born into a world without electricity, cars, airplanes, or telephones. So imagine yourself wandering the fair and walking into the RCA Pavilion, and for the first time, seeing a new marvel of science and technology.
Television. You can just lean back in a comfortable chair and relax and watch the game.
The earliest sets had 7-inch screens and cost $600. If you calculate that a subway ride to the fair cost a nickel, and it now costs $1, $600 would be the equivalent of $12,000 today. There were only 200 TV sets in New York City, and the first broadcast was FDR at the fair.
And I declare it open to all mankind.
Most of those predictions might seem a little naive, even a little bit silly in 1989. But what's really remarkable is how accurate their images of today's world turned out to be. And now it's our turn. 50 years from now, what will your home be like? Will you still drive a car? How far will the computer revolution go?
It's time to fasten your seatbelts. We're going to try to find out the answers. Our electronic time machine is departing for the year 2039, just minutes from now.
The Electronic Time Machine. Brought to you by Kellogg's Common Sense Oat Bran, the sensible thing to do.
Maybe you missed the article about oat bran in USA Today. Maybe you turned right past the one in Newsweek. And maybe all the other articles about oat bran somehow escaped your attention. But if you'd like to know how oat bran can be important to your health, here's something you should read. A box of Kellogg's Common Sense Oat Bran, with more oat bran than any leading ready-to-eat cereal. New Common Sense Oat Bran, a sensible thing to do.
Before you even touch this camera, you're going to want to own it. The incredible 35mm Infinity Super Zoom 300 from Olympus.
Have you ever wondered what a baggage handler might take on vacation? Well, everyone should take Samsonite's Glutton for Punishment.
In Germany's justly celebrated automotive industry, It is a particular accomplishment for a car to win an automotive award. It is doubly an accomplishment if it's not a German car. This year, Germany's highly prestigious Golden Steering Wheel Award was given to the highly affordable Mitsubishi Mirage. The Germans would have preferred that it be one of their own, but in the end, everybody loves a winner.
The elevator's around?
I'm sorry, Mr. James.
Ed James? Charlie Barnes, MCI. I'm your 8 o'clock.
Well, step into my conference room.
One report covers all your offices. Perfect when you open France.
France? Doing homework, huh? AT&T doesn't give me that.
I know.
Charlie, I take you to my boss now.
What?
He's on 25. I'll carry you.
MCI. We are the better long-distance company.
Jessica! Answer me, Jessica! My baby!
It took a little faith, a little courage, and a little girl to bring a nation together. Based on a true story, Everybody's Baby, the rescue of Jessica McClure, Sunday.
Lucille Ball was the first lady of comedy. We felt like we knew her. She touched our hearts and brought us joy. Don't miss a very special tribute to Lucy, all a part of the 3rd Annual American Comedy Awards, live Tuesday.
The 20th century has been an age of transformation. It rode into our lives on a horse and buggy, and it will leave on wings, traveling twice the speed of sound. That astonishing rate of change will carry us careening through the next half century toward 2039.
You're about to step off into that year and find an electronic world. More than ever before, our lives will be shaped by the technology we've created. What you are about to see are the ideas of the futurists, the dreamers of this part of the century. The dreams are all grand. In 2039, a hypersonic jet now being designed will take less than 3 hours to fly 750 people from Tokyo to New York. Magnetic levitation trains now in development will travel more than 250 miles an hour. A trip from New York to Washington will take less than an hour. Chicago to Seattle might take just 8. And in 2039, your newspaper, for lack of a future term, will come by phone line and carry only stories important to you. But where to begin tonight? Where the dreamers of 50 years ago never thought to look, at the sun. In many ways, it will be one of the keys to 2039.
Solar energy will directly displace all fossil fuel use in the commercial sector and will significantly displace other conventional forms of electricity if their costs are high.
Solar-powered cars, they are barely off the test tracks today. But experts say by 2039, at least 1 out of 10 new cars will be solar-powered. More than 3 million on the road here at home, 8 million more in Europe. Imagine many of these cars on the Los Angeles freeways running on the sun's power, producing no smog because they don't burn gasoline, and running for free. That will be a part of the 2039 reality. Electricity for our homes. On 1,000 acres in Southern California, Luce International today collects 200 megawatts of solar energy, enough to power a residential area the size of Tampa, Florida. With new collectors under construction, Luce will power a residential area the size of Denver or New Orleans by 1994. Some experts even suggest in 50 years the sunny Southwest will be an energy machine for the entire nation. In 2039, at least 4 out of 10 homes in America will get some or all of their power from non-petroleum energy sources. All new construction by then will include it.
In the average American's life in the next 50 years, they will have homes that are passively solar designed, that will have solar hot water heating on their roofs, and I would say somewhere about 10 to 20% of the electricity they receive from their utility will be solar powered.
Imagine your heat, air conditioning, and hot water all provided pollution-free. What else can we expect in our future homes? By 2039, you'll be able to design almost anything you can dream of, anything your budget will allow. With today's new technology, before this house is even built, computer-aided design can show you a three-dimensional model and even take you inside. This special glove will be available soon, and with it, you'll be able to fine-tune the design. For instance, let's move that door until the house is exactly the way you want it. But 50 years from now, you'll be able to put on special goggles, and the simulated house will surround you, just as realistic and big as the real house might be. The model will still be computer-generated, but you'll feel like you're right inside of it. You'll be able to check every detail, both inside and out. One more thing about that house. It will be smart, run by a sophisticated computer. It will know when to rotate the satellite dish, open the drapes, and start the vacuum cleaner robot. It will do just about anything you ask it to do. Once the family of the future
were optimistic about the future of medicine, and they were right. We have made remarkable advances in health care over the past 50 years. On average, Americans now live 11 years longer than they did then.
Futurists are just as optimistic today. They tell us we are standing on the edge of breakthroughs that could help us live longer and more productive lives than any time in history.
Correspondent Morton Dean has that story, but he doesn't begin in the future or the present. He begins where we started tonight, in 1939, with one of that year's blockbuster movies, which in its own way posed some medical questions that may one day be easy to solve. But they were a wizard's work back then.
In The Wizard of Oz, the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion each had a wish.
Sure to get a brain, a heart,
a home,
the knife.
We're off to see the wizard. A brain, a heart, and courage were easy to find when you followed the yellow brick road to Emerald City. But at the time of the New York World's Fair, the brain was largely a mystery, and stress would have been a big problem for the Cowardly Lion. One thing you could see was an artificial heart. Colonel Charles Lindbergh and Dr. Alexis Carrel's heart device became a main attraction at the fair. In the last 50 years, the heart has been at the center of many miracles and wonders in medicine, including a mechanical heart that really works. History was made in 1982 when Barney Clark received the first artificial heart. The man who designed that heart, a young doctor named Robert Jarvik, sees a future in which mechanical hearts would be very usual.
I think there'll be hundreds of thousands of people living with artificial hearts 50 years from now. And we talk about these more exotic things. But the artificial heart, as an example, is a very simple organ. It's a mechanical pump. An example here is one layout of a Jarvik 2000 heart inside this wireframe that represents the natural shape of the natural heart.
Only 10 years ago, Jarvik would have had to build a laboratory and complicated models just to accomplish the work now being done on one computer. The Jarvik 2000 heart will be implanted inside a real heart and designed to extend the patient's life for decades.
The key thing with the Jarvik 2000 heart compared to the developments with the Jarvik 7 heart, the key difference is that this is a miniature rotary blood pump. Biology didn't have the ability to make rotary devices, or we might have had birds with jet engines. Now we'll have something with humans that is more advanced than could be produced biologically. It's not impossible in 50 years that a pump like this could permit a patient to run marathons, maybe even win.
With or without artificial motors, the human body has been improved by leaps and
people will have a longer, better life. Not that it will be that much longer than the longest person who even lives today, but the quality of life will be a lot better. It will affect things like the chronic illnesses like arthritis.
By 2039, the number of people over the age of 65 will increase by 35%, and it will not be necessary to travel to another planet to feel like a kid at 80, such as these senior citizens in Cocoon.
Some symptoms like pain will be much, much more amenable to treatment, because that is one of the, a major problem in medicine is handling intractable pain, for instance. And that will be something that I believe will be able to be controlled.
Doctors will also be able to rely on swift, one-stop diagnostic machines without radiation. Micro-robots, a fraction of the size of a dime, will clean the bloodstream and destroy viruses. Robots will also be programmed to perform surgery with precision and accuracy. Lasers will replace the scalpel for most surgical procedures. And through the magic of 3D video, doctors all over the world will be able to sit in on and learn about the most delicate microscopic surgery. But there will be one thing that will have the greatest impact on medical science: prevention.
Prevention will be the key situation with the new tools that are coming out of this kind of biotechnology revolution that we're undergoing.
This revolution is already taking form at research laboratories and hospitals looking into the future for alternative healthcare techniques, such as vitamin therapy for cancer. The effects of environment, nutrition, and lifestyle on our bodies are being explored. But the most exciting hope for the future lies in a phenomenon called the double helix. The double helix. Over the next 50 years, the road to discovering the cause and cure of an infinite variety of diseases and human defects will lie within this structure. It looks something like a tinker toy. It's a model of the basic element of all human life, DNA. The National Institutes of Health have begun the biggest single medical research project in history to unlock and explore the mysteries of DNA. Heading the massive effort is Nobel Prize winner Dr. James Watson.
Our DNA world is a gold rush, and there's an awful lot of gold to be found. You know, if you could cut the incidence of cancer by half, you'd say, you know, you've done a lot. A lot of, you know, what we call genetic diseases. I mean, a lot of Down syndrome, sickle cell anemia, Tay-Sachs, muscular dystrophy, they're all due to the fact that one has inherited a gene which isn't quite perfect. And so you're going to be able to spot that the DNA isn't perfect. And a lot of people will be very pleased with that.
About the Human Genome Project, as it's called, Dr. Watson says we used to think our fate was in our stars. Now we know that in large measure, our fate is in our genes. An army of scientists around the world is now aiming at a cure for more than 10,000 diseases. Heading one team at the National Institutes of Health is Dr. Craig Venter.
It wasn't until the work of Dr. Watson we began to even understand the structure of DNA, the blueprint for living beings, whether it be plants, animals, bacteria, it doesn't matter. It's the blueprint of life. Contained in this DNA structure, in this sequence, is the blueprint for all living species.
We are all born with DNA, a set of instructions that make up the human being. We all have genes which determine our sex, size, coloring, intelligence. They can have an impact on behavior and even creativity, and they also carry our predisposition to inherited diseases. When scientists are able to decipher the complete language contained within our DNA, it will tell them everything about human life, everything from evolution to predicting and preventing disease.
In 50 years, it's certainly possible that all genetic diseases, or most of them, could be eliminated or treated very effectively. 500 diseases can be attributed to a change in a single gene. Now, those are going to be, in theory, amenable to gene therapy, where replacement genes could be given to those individuals to overcome the defect. We're going to be learning vast amounts of new information about biology of human beings that we have never even imagined before. And that information base is going to affect every disease across the board, whether it has a genetic component or not.
Even the common cold is likely to become a thing of the past, along with Alzheimer's disease, diabetes, schizophrenia, heart disease, hypertension, manic depression.
The information, it's going to come so fast. You know, the excitement of being a scientist is understanding how things work, where we come from, and how to affect it to make the world more positive. And we've never had such tools and such information. It's clearly the most exciting time in the history to be a scientist.
Are there any scientists who you can think of whose brain you might like to have? Ben?
Benjamin Franklin's.
Albert Einstein.
George Washington Carver's.
As you visit a science class, you can't help but wonder where the next Jarvik is, where the next Nobel-winning Watson is, perhaps right there. And is that the young mind that will find a cure for AIDS? If the trends hold true, and if the predictions are accurate, it will be an exciting time to be a scientist. No 50-year period has ever begun with so much promise for so much advancement and achievement in medical science.
And what about today's most virulent diseases, cancer and AIDS? Will they still be with us? Medical futurists tell us breakthroughs are always possible, but there are no absolute cures on the horizon. Still, we will almost certainly learn more about how to keep ourselves healthy, and that in itself will let us lead longer lives.
But it is not only our health we'll worry about in the future. We are already terrorized by crime in our city streets. Will it be even worse 50 years from now? And how will we respond? Tonight we have shown you how life may be better in 2039. When we come back, we'll take you to a much darker reality, a shadowy future there is still time to prevent.
Tonight's ABC News special, The Electronic Time Machine, will continue in a moment. 1989, the year 2039. The Electronic Time Machine continues. Here again are Forrest Sawyer and Paula Zahn.
Scientists are fond of telling us that technology is neither good nor evil. It simply exists, like a genie let out of the bottle, waiting for our commands. Tonight, we've shown you the benefits of technology in a future world, the sun harness, the mysteries of our genetic code finally solved.
But what if we aren't careful? What if, in our rush toward greater scientific knowledge, we do nothing to solve the growing epidemic of crime and violence in America? We've used the visions we've found in films to help create a world futurists say could exist 50 years from now. Brace yourselves. Our time machine is sitting down next in a twilight country, still called the United States, but it's like no place you've ever seen before. In 2039 will be a crowded world, the population twice what it is now, and it will be divided. The rich enjoying the advances of science, the poor struggling to survive.
Because people are so tightly put together, so tightly welded electronically, the places that flourish in the 21st century will look like Japan. The places that don't flourish will look like Beirut. It's all neighborhoods and essentially drug gangs, narco-terrorists, groups who are crossed. They're just a boiling mess of religion and ethnic hatred and black market profit and political manipulation. And no one dares to go in.
In fact, 2039 will be a strange combination of order and violence, a haunting mix of decay and high tech. And behind it all, for good and for bad, will be the driving power of computers.
Attention all stations, I have a temporary blockage.
Machines with almost human intelligence will form a global tracking network, monitoring everything from financial transactions to secret corporate strategies. Information will become the world's most precious commodity.
Computers are going to be both the greatest crime generators and greatest crime solvers of the future. They are going to open up whole new technologies in terms of stealing, in terms of blackmail, in terms of theft of trade secrets that we probably haven't even dreamt of today.
The criminal hackers of 1989 will evolve into a new, even more dangerous breed. Outlaws who specialize in breaking through electronic security systems. It'll be a game played by thieves, and even by the most dangerous criminals of all, terrorists.
The ultimate fear would be that somebody would tamper with defense-related computer system, perhaps, and trigger off World War III, or use the Star Wars defense if it's ever put in place for offense. You know, you've got a lot of power in a computer, and obviously if it's misused, that certainly would be something to worry about.
But the wired game of electronic crime will still be played only by the wealthy and the educated. Past the glow of the computer terminals, out in the troubled city streets, America will be a war zone.
There's going to be violent crime in '39. Individually, the people who commit the crime are going to be very much more violent than they are now.
Gangs will roam burned-out sections of cities, fighting for territory, trafficking in information, stolen property, the latest designer drugs.
In the future, drugs won't make you high. They'll make you superhuman. The coming thing in drugs is performance enhancers, not intoxicants.
Tomorrow's criminal will not only be armed with improved vision, strength, and reflexes, he'll also have weapons today's lawbreaker can only dream of. In order to stand against this wave of violence, the police in 2039 may come to look more like the Army, prepared for anything, from drug raids to riots. Surveillance systems will be far more advanced.
You got all this on tape?
I got every word of it.
Good.
In fact, in 1989, infrared tracking is already so advanced, it can detect the small glow of a cigarette 200 feet away. Listening devices can hear through solid brick walls.
Walk down the main street.
Satellites 300 miles in the air can track the movements of a single individual.
An important point about future surveillance is that locational tracking will be very, very easy. I think a second trend that we'll see is a shift toward machines doing the surveillance rather than human beings.
I have not received the menu for tomorrow.
Those robots you saw earlier, designed to help you at home,
This concludes the menu for today.
will also serve as the new front line in the war on crime. Intelligent, mobile, designed to handle the riskiest assignments.
Here's a policeman with the nose of a German Shepherd, with the strength and shielding. You're not going to have a condition where there's open crack dealing on the streets in a neighborhood. Robots just wouldn't allow that.
As far-fetched as it may sound, what we have so far seen only in the movies may become reality. Cyborgs, part human, part machine. One thing appears almost certain. The heart of police operations in 2039 will be an extraordinary system of electronic intelligence gathering and analysis. Laser beams are already being used to lift what would be undetectable fingerprints from crime scene evidence. That evidence will be examined by stunningly sophisticated computers.
This system would be advanced enough simply to identify the suspects, do all the information required to establish probable cause that a violation has occurred, write the affidavit, present the evidence to a U.S. attorney, and recommend prosecution.
That same computer system will be working to help officers in the field. Now take a look at this device, which is now in development and could become standard equipment in every police car. All an arresting officer has to do is place a suspect's finger here, and instantly a fingerprint and a mugshot are sent to the central computer. 60 seconds later, he receives a complete conviction record. In a world where both high-tech and violent crime are epidemic, what price will we pay for our safety? Will vigilantes prowl our neighborhoods? Will our homes become armed camps, sealing out an ever more frightening landscape? Will 2039 be a place we no longer recognize?
A retinal identification check is required to proceed.
You won't need identity cards in 2039. Your eyes, your voice, even your genetic code, DNA, will be used to prove who you are. Already, investigators are tracking suspects through the tiniest traces of skin or or blood left at a crime scene. 50 years from now, the authorities will be able to monitor you from birth.
I think we'll see biological loyalty oaths, where extensive analysis of your physiological system will be done to determine your drug status, your psychological status, and perhaps even your tendency to engage in certain kinds of deviant or illegal forms of behavior.
The most serious and depressing problem will be that the freedoms that we've once enjoyed and become accustomed to as American citizens will no longer be there for us.
With our genetic histories recorded, our conversations overheard, our financial records stored in computer files, the very idea of privacy may disappear. And in our struggle against a rising tide of crime, society may go one step further.
Watch for a man running through the streets, repeating, calling all citizens.
This is City Probe Scanner. We've run across some illegal sexual activity.
Thank you for your assistance in crime prevention.
It's quite possible that we will move towards a society where we are told it's an aspect of good citizenship to watch our neighbors, to watch our family members. So perhaps the people that you live with would be watching you, your office mates would be watching you, the taxi driver would be watching you.
There will be no place to hide. There will be no place to escape your past. When technology defines your identity, it's much more difficult just to forget and start over. You don't really have that option anymore.
A child born today will be 50 years old in 2039. His world then will be shaped not only by the technologies we are now creating, but by how we decide to use them. Experts tell us that nightmare landscape of 2039 is a very real possibility, but it's only that, one of a vast array of potential worlds. We move closer to one of those worlds with every decision we make. Between us and our new home in 2039 is a frightening terrain of problems so challenging, we're forced to ask a question we humans have never had to face before. Are we going to get there at all?
Now we're going to set our time machine for the near future, for tomorrow morning, so we can look at these problems and decisions in the light of a new day.
And we'll take that journey, voyages in our time machine tonight, to the home of the future, driven by computers and powered by the sun, to the medical world of 2039, a land of artificial organs and genetic engineering. And we've visited a violent reality of computer crime and constant surveillance. Each of them, and countless others, could become our future. Which one?
That will be decided by how we face the problems we already see reflected in today's headlines. If we are to make our way to the future we want for our children and grandchildren, we must make difficult choices in the years to come and face what experts tell us are the greatest challenges we have ever known.
The environment, devastated by human growth. Tropical rainforests destroyed at the rate of 1 football field per second. Plant and animal species disappearing, perhaps as many as 100 a day. The topsoil from our farmland blowing away, an area twice the size of Maryland, becoming unusable each year.
Humanity as a species is doing something that no wise family would ever do in its own economics. That is, it is burning its capital. In the process of living on capital, we're destroying our sources of income, and in the end, of course, we're destroying ourselves.
Energy. Fossil fuels have already polluted our air and water. And with experts predicting we might run out of oil by 2039, still more problems may be down the road.
If we do nothing and just continue the way we are, using 95% of our energy from fossil fuels, it will create an economic collapse long before 50 years from now.
Population. The numbers are soaring. 250,000 more people on Earth every day. The world population will double by 2039. And right now, 850 million do not have enough to eat.
The question is not whether population growth is going to slow or not. It will. The only question is whether it's going to slow because we systematically move towards smaller families or because we delay and hunger, starvation lead to rising death rates.
Global tensions. Over everything hangs the fear of war. Regional conflicts are increasing, and experts predict by 2039, more than 16 countries will be armed with nuclear weapons.
Now, that makes a much more complicated world, and we run the risk of a nuclear accidental war or unthought-out war occurring in volatile parts of the world, even if there was a build down between the Soviet and the American armaments.
Are there solutions to all of these problems? Most scientists, politicians, futurists agree. The answer is yes. Some of the solutions are easy to understand.
There's no such thing as garbage. We have to recycle all of that like the Japanese do. I mean, the Japanese, one of the reasons they're so successful is they recycle 50%.
We'll have to start planting trees on a scale that we probably haven't even imagined yet. We're going to have to get serious about soil conservation.
We know what we can do about energy. Going solar solves the pollution problems and the economic problems and the greenhouse problem. We know that. It's all there. Just a question of working out the pattern when to do what.
Some proposed solutions are bitterly controversial.
Stop sending gifts of food to a starving country. Just grit your teeth and tell them you're on your own and you've got to make your population match the carrying capacity of your land.
But if there is argument over exactly what to do, there is agreement on this. What we decide to do over these next 50 years will be critical to our survival. And somehow, we must find a way to cooperate.
It's almost as if the human family is being nudged along by Mother Nature to grow up. We are all in the same boat now, whether we like it or not. And it's no good playing these games about whose end of the boat is sinking.
The situation is running downhill at a truly frightening pace. On the other hand, our potential for solving the problem is absolutely enormous. So I don't know what's going to happen. I hope we're going to take the optimistic route, and therefore whoever's listening to this tape in 2039 will be able to say, by God, they made the right choices, and we've got to continue down the same route so that our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren have a decent world to live in.
We started tonight back at the World's Fair in 1939. It was a burst of optimism on the eve of a catastrophe, World War II. One fairgoer wrote, "Sure, there was a lot of hype, we knew that, but we loved it anyway, for its powerful assertion that there could be a future. We needed to believe that, against all evidence to the contrary."
And in the long run, the fair was right. On the other side of the disastrous war, the future turned out to be even more extraordinary than they dreamed. Today, futurists continue to peer into their crystal balls and, despite the dangers they say clearly lay ahead, predict a world full of marvels.
And if all their guesses and all their hopes about what we could be in 2039 seem naive in the face of our problems, there is this fact. Almost no one says such a world is impossible. We can make our way there,